Hello, my name is Clay Usie, and today I will be presenting a leadership demonstration as part of the curriculum requirements for my Master's of Leadership Studies degree, class MLS 5331, Leadership Communications. Have you ever asked yourself the question, what determines greatness specific to the art of leadership? What defines winning? How do I guide my organization to the winner's circle? I think it's fair to say all leaders are challenged with asking themselves this question at some point in their careers. Stephen Denning classifies the language of leadership as a secret, and I believe that in order to unlock it, you must control the narrative to inspire action as a leader. Inspiring action is often associated with change, and where there is change, there will always be complexity, where systems and methods do not exist. Today I will be discussing Denning's 8 general principles of governing efforts to stimulate the desire for change. Denning has devised an 8-step model to assist in navigating the complexities of change through stimulating a follower's desire for change, which I will now discuss in greater detail. First, the underlying idea should be worthwhile for its own sake. Leaders will have trouble eliciting sustained enthusiasm for a different future if the goal is merely instrumental and time-limited. Skillful communication may win some short-term gains for an instrumental goal. However, enthusiasm is unlikely to be enduring unless the idea is perceived to be worthwhile in itself. Secondly, the communication tool must make the idea memorable. If the audience can't remember the main elements of the change idea after the presentation, it's going to be hard for them to be enthusiastic about it. Implementing it is another story. Hence, catchy phrases or succinct stories that encapsulate the idea may work. However, long, complex arguments that are hard to remember won't. Third, the idea must become the audience's own idea. Stimulating the desire for change is a subtle process of putting one or more options in front of people and enticing them to co-create their own future. It entails enabling the audience to imagine a different, more promising story that they could be living, a story they, for whatever reason, have not yet visualized till now. It's about respecting the audience's ability to see that for themselves, not about forcing something on them. If the idea does not become the audience's own idea, it will never inspire the enduring enthusiasm that is the hallmark of transformational leadership. Fourth, the audience needs room to contribute. If the audience has no say-so in how the new change is to be implemented, then sustained enthusiasm is unlikely. Significant change ideas can't be implemented successfully if listeners aren't given a role in the process of adaptation and if they fail to see it as their own idea. Instead, it will remain an idea they regard as a detached fashion, something out there, something that the leadership owns, and they don't. Instead, the audience must get inside the idea, realize that it's unfinished, and see the possibilities ahead of them. As they adapt the idea into their own context, they begin to grasp how it is relevant for them and why it is sensible, logical, attractive, enticing, or even obvious. For the idea to become fully adapted to their needs, they must be the ones to customize it, because only they know their own needs. Fifth, the idea must be positive. Since the sustained enthusiasm of transformational leadership is a positive emotion, the leader's communication of the change must be positive. If the leader's speech is negative or neutral, then where will the positive energy come from? If the leader is positive and enthusiastic, that is what it spreads. It's the contagiousness of the leader's positive emotion and energy that stimulates the desire for a new future. Sixth, the idea must be positive for the particular audience. The communication must lead the audience to see gains for themselves, not just for the organization or for the leader. An idea that makes the company or even the country great may inspire people for a short time. However, if there's nothing in it for the audience, then enthusiasm will likely fade. So the leader's communication must make it easy for the audience to see why the change will be good for them personally. Seventh, the most useful communication tools tend to be stories. Stories aren't the only way to stimulate lasting desire for change, but they are certainly among the more useful methods. Some of the other methods that work, such as brilliant aphorisms, or word pictures, or motivational songs, have the practical disadvantage that they require extraordinary talent to create them. By contrast, telling a story is simple and accessible to every human being. No unusual talents are needed to create the kinds of stories that can stimulate the desire for change. Lastly, communication tools in general are effective when they generate a new story in the mind of each listener. This is because people make decisions within a narrative framework. The key here is that in order to be effective, the leader must create a new story in the mind of the listener. When David Marquette, a former U.S. Navy submarine captain, commanded his submarine, he employed these principles with precision and achieved greatness towards his implementation of change, which provides an excellent example of this theory in practice. Let us take a deeper look into how, then, Captain David Marquette achieved greatness by stimulating the desire for change.
I was trained for one submarine. My guys were trained to do what they were told. That's a deadly combination. We all know organizations where people just follow the leader into disastrous situations. So I got my guys together and I said, hey, we got a problem here. I was trained for another submarine. You're trained to do whatever nonsense comes out of my mouth. That's right, Captain. I mean, they knew. They already knew. I was pretty much talking to myself. So I said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do, guys? And we talked about it. Okay, what I really wanted to do was get ready for the inspection. But we were sitting in the wardroom. We spent a couple hours. We were talking about it. And we came up with all these different things. And, well, you Captain, you just got to be smarter. You got to give better orders. It's like, well, how am I going to learn a whole nuclear submarine, miles of valves and pipes? I spent a year learning Olympia, 2 weeks over here. So in a year, we'll be safe? That's not going to work. We had to deploy the submarine in 6 months. So we talked about it, and they said, okay, there's only one logical solution. We figured it out. You, they're pointing at me, you shut up. What do you mean? That's not what captains do. That's not what captains of nuclear submarines do. They walk around. They give orders. They sound like Russell Crowe. Head 2/3, dive, make it up 500 feet. Helm left 15 degrees weather, steady course 255. Load torpedoes and tubes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Flood down, open outer doors, right? And I thought about it. And you know what? They were right. So at that point, I vowed never to give another order. And if you came down on my submarine, it would have been very confusing. Because you couldn't have pointed. It would have been hard to say, well, who's the captain here? Because you wouldn't have seen me giving orders. I did retain one order. The final order to launch a weapon, a torpedo or a missile, I kept with me because I felt that since that was going to result in the deaths of other human beings, that I didn't want that on anyone's conscience but mine. That was my moral and ethical responsibility. But even though everything else in the Navy, there's long lists of things that says the captain has to authorize. Captain should authorize. You got a couple nukes in your group, they'll tell you it's true. Captain authorize, submerge the ship, get underway, start up the reactor, shut down the reactor, connect to shore power, divorce from shore power, on and on, break rig for dive, on and on and on, pages of these things. I just refused to give those orders. What we replaced it with was intent. Instead of giving instructions, if you want your people to think, don't give instructions, give intent. So they would come to you, hey, what do you want me to do? Well, Left full rudder, steady course 255. No. I said, well, what are we trying to accomplish here today? Well, we're trying to get in position so that when the enemy submarine comes through, okay, so where do you think we should position the ship? Maybe over here. Good idea. Go there. You give intent to them, and they give intent to you. So my officer stopped requesting permission. And every other submarine, Captain, request permission to submerge the ship. Submerge the ship. Submerge the ship, aye. On the Santa Fe, Captain, I intend to submerge the ship. Very well. And they did it. And it might seem like it's a very small, nuanced change of language, but it was hugely powerful because the psychological ownership now shifts to them. They need to discover the answer. Otherwise, you're always the answer man. You can never go home and eat dinner. And so we started doing this. And it was hugely powerful. Actually, we went another step. Then I got smarter and I said, when the officer said, Captain, I intend to submerge the ship, I would ask him, well, what do you think I'm thinking right now? And he'd look at me, hard to tell. I'm guessing you're wondering whether it's safe. Bingo! I said, well, convince me it's safe. He said, Captain, I intend to submerge the ship. All men are below. Hatches are shut. Ship's rigged for dive. I checked the bottom depth. The submarine's in the water that's been assigned to us. Then later I would ask them, is it the right thing to do? And they would say, well, yes, sir, because our mission requires that we... And these are the two pillars that I think support this idea of giving control. These are the two pillars that need to be in place. The technical competence, which is represented by, is it safe? And the organizational clarity, which is represented by, is it the right thing to do? And you put those things in place, and then you can give control. And you give control, and you put those things in place. And you are off to the races. So think about what's happening now. My officers are starting to think like me, because I have to think like, where should we do the ship? And so the guys below them. Now this took 24 hours to happen. It took a couple years for the full implementation, but immediately there was change. The officers started thinking like me, and so pretty soon I could go in the engine room, find the engine room lower level watch who was taking logs in the lube oil pumps, and he would know what the submarine was doing. He would know whether we were up tight, close to the enemy, and it was time to stay quiet, or whether we had backed out a little bit, and this may be a good time to change filters and make a little bit of noise. A year later, we received another inspection. A year later, we received an inspection. The inspecting team gave us the highest grade they had ever seen. Not that year, not in the Pacific, ever seen. Why? I mean, this crew had a captain who was a dummy. It's because that needle started moving up. And on another submarine, there was one guy in charge, one guy giving orders, one guy thinking, and 134 people doing what they're told. I don't care how smart you are. On my submarine, I got 135 thinking, active, passionate, creative, proactive, taking initiative people. It's a tidal wave. You don't stand a chance. Here's the solution. Move the authority to where the information is. You mean the software engineer can decide whether we ship the software? Yeah. You mean the client, my salesman can close the deal? Well, up to $1,000. No. Yes. Whatever the price? Yes. What does it take to make that happen? Now, if you're picturing a lot of people out there doing crazy things and a bunch of arrows going in a bunch of different directions, you have the wrong picture. You create the environment so that those people are out there making decisions as if the CEO were standing right behind them. And if it's not the same decision, it's actually a better decision because they have the information. And not only will you get better speed of execution, because now you don't have this delay, what happens is those people feel like they matter because they're thinking. You engender thinking. You create the environment for thinking. The secret is nothing I said is hard. There's nothing hard. The only thing that's hard is you. It will feel wrong. You've been genetically and culturally programmed to take charge and make it happen. Take control and attract followers. And what you want is to give control and create leaders. It will feel wrong, and you will repeatedly start down this path if you so choose, and then you'll be angry at yourself like I was. And you will have a failure, and you'll go back to the old ways. And you will pick yourself up, and you will go again, and you will go again. And by doing so, you will achieve the greatest thing possible. You will have achieved greatness, not because of the deeds and acts that you did, but because you set an environment where the people around you and their families and their schools and their organizations and their businesses, they've achieved greatness. That will be the greatest thing of all. Go forth and be great.
So in review of this presentation, let's pause to consider which methods work best in our own leader environments. According to Denning, communication tools are sorted into 3 broad categories. Communication tools that are easy to use and generally effective tools that require special talents, and tools that generally don't work. Much depends on the skill with which the device is used and its context, because if it is used poorly, then any of these tools will ultimately fail. But if it is applied with passion and creativity, then any of them can work to a certain extent. As we could see in Captain Marquette's animated vignette, he followed each of the 8 steps, and he and his team achieved the greatest successes of its likeness in the history of the Navy, which showcased that the ease of getting the principles to work by shifting traditional leader roles and empowering subordinate leaders to make decisions can deliver significant impacts for the greater good of any organization. You, too, can also achieve this greatness in any endeavor by mastering the ability to stimulate change that empowers your subordinates to maximize their potential and performance.